hello everybody in Facebook, nice to see you, and welcome to day 2 of our Leading with Courage workshop, our masterclass for this week. So welcome to everybody, and welcome especially to everybody in the Zoom who's come along this evening. It's really great to see you. So I can just see some things coming in the chat, so thank you for introducing yourselves to everybody. That's wonderful. So it gives you some idea of where everybody is from, and it's amazing because we've got people from Switzerland, from Germany, from France, from the UK, and I know we've got people watching who are in Nepal and also Australia. So hello to Julia and Susan, who are going to be watching in the morning. So great to have you with us, kind of not exactly now, but we know that you're watching, and also to those who are watching in the Facebook group who can't make it into the Zoom. So welcome to you all. So this is day 2, and today we're going to be thinking about looking at curiosity and how we can use curiosity to develop our courageous leadership. So just as a way of leading into that, I would like you to have a quick look at a picture that I actually really love. It's a picture from 1432, so it's fairly old, and it is. Let me just add in a couple more people there, and it is a picture called the Arnolfi portrait, and I'm sure you will know it. You will recognise it. So let me just share my screen with you so that you can see it too. So I'm sure you've seen that before, and I love this portrait because it's the faces on the people that you wouldn't exactly know that this was a wedding portrait. They don't look incredibly happy, but apparently it is a wedding portrait. But what I'm really interested in for us today is the mirror, because do you see the mirror in the background? It's actually a convex mirror, and this is the first painting where this was used. And it became quite a fashionable thing in Renaissance art, and you can see it in quite a few paintings. Sometimes it's tucked away very discreetly, but in this one I really like it because it's right in the middle of our view. And if we look very closely, I'm going to try to show you if I can make it a little bit bigger on the screen there. And if you look very carefully, you can actually see that the painter himself has painted himself into the picture because he is the witness of the wedding here, of the marriage. Now this mirror has a lot of symbolism, of course, and it was actually called God's all-seeing eye. I think it's quite interesting that the painter Van Eyck put himself as God's eye. So that's firstly quite an interesting point. But also the second interesting point, I think, is when you look at the convex mirror, you can see that the window at the side is slightly distorted, but the people are not. And the reason why I want to show you this is that today we're going to be thinking about looking into the mirror, but what we see, is it really the truth? And what is distorted? What have we distorted? What are other people seeing? And how can we rectify that to help us become more courageous leaders? So I'm just going to switch us all back to having everybody there together. Okay, so this is a central part of coaching, and this premise that my vision of myself is not what you see, and what I see of you is not what you see of yourself. And this whole idea of truth, what is true? Well, this is a very philosophical question, and we could get into all sorts of debates about this, but to keep it simple, it's my vision of the world is not the same as your vision of the world. But sometimes what we need to do is actually get other people's vision of ourselves, and also to take ourselves back and see for ourselves our own vision of the world and see it more clearly, and try to understand what it is that's giving us that distortion of the convex mirror. So I hope that makes a little bit of sense. As we go on this evening, I hope that it will become a little clearer. So today we're going to think first of all of the more traditional ways that you can do that. So one of the ways that I'm sure you are all very well aware of is doing a 360-degree assessment. Now this is very useful, and I think it's absolutely a great start when you're trying to be curious about your leadership. And by 360-degree assessment, if anyone hasn't come across that, it simply means you ask everybody you work with around you, so that your seniors, your peers, people who are in your team, you ask all of them to give some feedback. Now, obviously, that can be structured in different ways. The way I do it is that we come up with some very open-ended questions about leadership. What do they think your style of leadership is? What do they think you could improve? What would be their advice for you? So we keep it very positive, very forward-looking, but at the same time, a lot of interesting things come out. So that's one thing that you can do. Another thing you can do is doing one of these assessments. So there are numerous. One that I like is called DISC, and it's very interesting, and it gives you a profile of where your preferences are, where your strengths are, and it also shows you how you can improve on different areas to help you move forward. It's not just for leadership; it can be used for anybody in a team. So those two kind of profiling can be very, very useful for everybody. But what can you actually do for yourself? So there's a lot that you can do, and that's what we're going to focus on really today. So what I would like you to do, first of all, is to think of a leader that you really admire. So some leader that maybe you've worked for, maybe you've worked with, or maybe someone you're aware of, but try to think of somebody who you know fairly well. So a leader that you admire for some reason. And then what I would like you to do on a piece of paper, if you have one close to you, I would like you to write down very specifically not what their characteristics are, but what are their behaviours that they do all the time that make them courageous or, in your eyes, a successful leader. And try to just keep it simple. It could be as simple as, well, they say hello to everybody at the beginning of a meeting. It could be as simple as, well, they make time to talk to people when they need it. Whatever it is, keep it simple, but try to be very specific, not just, oh, he's a great guy. That's not going to really help us. I would like you to be very specific about the behaviours that person exhibits on a daily basis. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute or two and give you a chance to write that down. Okay, so I hope you've got a few things written down there, and that's something you can continue afterwards. So if you're looking at the list of behaviours there that you've made, are any of those things that you do as well? So maybe there are things that, yes, you've already picked up on, and you think that would be that behaviour in particular would be something that you do now, or is there something that you could now take on board and you could use that very easily? So just make a note, just annotate your list. Is that something you do, something you could do more of, or something you could start to do, or not at all if it's not applicable to you? So this is a very quick way to make a list of things that you can put into action straight away. And with many of my clients, this is a great way to start, because when I ask people, what is a great leader to you, it's such a difficult question to answer. But if we focus on the behaviours, then we have something firstly that's actionable, we can put into practice immediately, and secondly, we can track that. So you can decide, okay, this week, this is what I'm going to do. Maybe it's as simple as I'm going to finish meetings a few minutes earlier so that I can have extra quality time to talk to people on an individual basis. It could be as simple as that, or it could be as complex as organising meetings in a completely different way, because that seems to work better. So you go as simple or as complex as you wish. Right, let's have a little look at your homework from yesterday. Now, those people who weren't here yesterday, the replays are available for you. So I do urge you to go back and look at those, because each session does build upon those. So I asked everybody yesterday to just have a think about times when they don't feel that courageous. So when you look at your list from yesterday, I now would like you to think back to that leader that you were just thinking about. So what would that leader do? What concrete actions would that leader take? And are any of those useful for you? So again, make yourself a quick list. What actions would that leader take? And maybe the leader you're thinking of isn't in the same position as you, but what behaviours could you adopt? Because ultimately, it comes down to action. And I think this is where coaching is very powerful, because we can spend a long time talking about theory, but what makes the difference is what you actually do on a daily basis. Now, yesterday also, when we were talking about different things towards the end and in the discussion, somebody said that they wanted to change they were aware that they needed to change from being the train driver when we were looking at the picture to being someone who was taking much more of a bird's eye view, but they weren't sure how to do that. And just a quick word on that, my advice would be to forget the how for the moment. So if you're thinking, well, I don't know how to do that, just think about what that leader would look like in that situation, and we'll work on the how later. Because often if we can get the clarity around what that looks like, even if we can't work out the steps to get there, we're going to get there much, much quicker if we've got a really clear vision of what that's going to look like, what that courageous leadership is going to look like. So don't worry too much about the how if you can't do that straight away. Okay, so moving further into this idea of building self-awareness. So away from doing the kind of profiling exercises, looking at a courageous leader and analysing against that person, those are quite quick ways. So now the more long-term ways that need a bit more practice. And these are central to coaching and absolutely central to becoming more courageous. And why? Because to be courageous, we really need to see ourselves clearly. And we need to be able to observe ourselves, and we need to be able to see what we're doing, what we're not doing. We need to be able to see those blind spots, those patterns of behaviour that maybe we haven't noticed. So being able to see ourselves clearly, being able to observe is absolutely critical, and it's such a quick way to make progress all the time. So this is what we're going to look at now. So 3 ways that you can start to do this. So the first one is looking at negative emotions. Now, by that, I mean we're thinking back to a little bit that we talked about yesterday, but we're going to think about negative emotions and positive emotions, but simply as data. So that data comes in. I feel worried. I feel stressed about something. I'm going to take that data and I'm just going to see it as data. I don't need to be stuck in that in that hollow space of being all consumed by that negative emotion. All I need to do is just accept that that is data. So if you imagine a situation, so for example, imagine that you're feeling very stressed about something, feeling really stressed about a situation, and you feel all of these emotions. You're feeling quite uneasy about it. You're not sure how to move forward, and it can all feel all a little bit too much. So what do we do? Okay, so first thing, we recognize that we're feeling stressed. Now that stress might not be just one thing. So try to label it correctly. So by that I mean it might be, for example, we're feeling very tired. It might be that we're feeling overwhelmed. It might be that we're feeling anxious about something. So try to work out what it is and work it out very precisely. And by doing that, already we're taking a step back from it, and then we can accept that the data is there. Okay, that's why I'm feeling stressed, because I'm actually tired. So what do I need to do about that? Okay, so maybe I need to have a better night's sleep tonight. It can be as simple as that. It could be more complex and be lots of things. It could be overwhelmed. I've just got too much to do. I need to sort out my time management. It could be anxiety about something. Well, why is that? Maybe I'm not prepared well enough for that, or I need to get some help. I need to ask somebody's advice and find a way through. So whatever it is, we acknowledge it, we analyze it, we label it very correctly and precisely, and then we take some action to try and try to move forward with it. Now this, if you're interested in that, there's a fantastic book by Susan David called Emotional Agility, and I recommend that book. And she talks all about that and goes into a lot of detail. So if that's something that you're interested in, I do recommend buying the book. It's you can get it in French as well, so it's available in French and English. I'm sure it's available in German as well. It's been translated into many languages. Susan David is from the States and very highly accomplished in this area. So I would really recommend that today. That was my very quick summary of her, lifetime's work. So do have a little look at that. So the second point is really, again, thinking about emotions and thinking about that internal voice that we mentioned very briefly yesterday. And frequently that voice can be something along the lines of, I'm not good enough. Now, when we have that voice of, I can't do that, I'm not good enough, that's not for me, that's not something that I ever thought I would have to do, and I don't really think that I can do it. Any of those kind of messages, we can work through those. And actually, there's also another book for you, and I have it here, called The Inner Game of Tennis. And it's actually an old book. It's by Timothy Galway, written in 1974. And he was writing for tennis coaches, but actually it's very useful. And he's written lots of other versions as well, more recently. So that I can really recommend. And he talks about the fact that we have two selves talking to each other, two voices. And he calls them, one is the teller, somebody saying, well, do this, do that, no, correct that, and judging and saying, no, you should do this and you should do that. And it's often the word should, you could, you should, you must, those kind of words. And then the other side is the doer, the person trying to do it. Well, I'm trying to do my best. And the other one is it's a constant commentary. Well, you should have done that. That's not good enough. And the other one's, well, I'm trying really hard. I'm focusing on it. I'm really doing my best. And it's this constant, very noisy conflict between the two selves. And what Timothy Galway talks about is trying to get into this state of relaxed concentration. Now that sounds, it maybe sounds a bit paradoxical, but in fact, you probably know it. For example, when you're driving, you probably don't really think about what you're doing. You don't think about every single move. You're not thinking about coordinating your right foot with your left foot and your well, I'm using my right arm here because I'm driving in France, but you're not thinking about all of that coordination. It just happens. It's relaxed relaxed concentration, and it is unconscious. So that's the kind of state you want to be able to get to. And the way to do that, as he describes, is to turn off that voice of you should, you shouldn't, you could have done that, all of that judgment. So taking away the judgment, what are we left with? So we're left with observing what's going on, simply observing. And that's an interesting exercise. So if you imagine the tennis, for example, instead of saying, and I can relate to this, I'm not a gifted tennis player. So when I try to play tennis, it's very often that I will be thinking, oh my goodness, that was awful, that was really bad. So his idea is, well, forget that, and really focus on what you're supposed to be doing, and even use a distraction. So he would say, focus on the colour of the ball. And this makes you, of course, look at the ball, which, of course, for people like me is quite helpful because often we forget to do that. So it's a way of finding a distraction without having the judgment, you should, you must, you could have done. And this is, I think, a very interesting way, firstly, of learning. As a teacher, I find this fascinating, but as a coach as well, it's a very powerful way of changing our thoughts and just observing and then making changes, but without judging. So that's number 2. So number 3, and this is what I'd like you to do now, is in the chat, if you wouldn't mind sharing with everybody, I would like you to write down something that you did today to help your team move forward courageously. So what did you do today? Did you have a conversation with somebody? Did you notice something and tell somebody that they had done something really well? Did you have a difficult conversation that helped your team move forward? Did you have a meeting that was particularly collaborative or creative, or a conversation? So what did you do today? Because what I would like you to do also is to become more self-aware of what you are already doing to move your team forward in a courageous way. So just take a moment to put that in the chat, to share that. And it doesn't need to be big things. It can be very, very small things. Because actually it's not the big things that count in the end. It really is, it's the small things, it's the little actions every day, it's the constant attention to courageous details, if you like. And as you're doing that, I would like you to really think, what was it that you did? What was your behaviour that enabled that to happen? Now, I just saw a lovely one pop up there. Someone who said that they listened. Yes, that's absolutely, it's absolutely key, isn't it? A performance review, excellent. So when you were doing that performance review, what was it that made the difference? What was it that made it courageous? And so supporting a new project, setting 2 engineers to support a new project, great. So how did you do that? Try to analyse what you did. I decided who would be responsible for undertaking a task where it was unclear. Great, so you provided clarity. How did you do it? I had a planning meeting to discuss the collection of information. Great. So how did you make that meeting successful? What did you do? So now you've got your task. I'd like you to analyse it. What was it that you did? What was it that made the difference? So do put that in the chat as well. These are great. Absolutely brilliant. And if you're not quite sure, imagine that someone else is looking on. So imagine that a colleague that you trust, that you respect, was looking on. What would they say made the difference? Maybe it was a kind word. It could be something as simple as that. Maybe like somebody said there, they were listening, really listening, actively listening. Maybe it was that made the difference. What was it that made the difference for you? And as you're looking at what other people are saying, maybe think, oh yes, I do that too. Extend your list, because you have lots of skills already that already are making you courageous. And now we just need to do more of that. So take what you are already doing and just magnify it. So presenting the project in a structured way, absolutely. Teamwork to define, yes, great. So helping the team work together, excellent. So helping people to collaborate, great. That's it. You've got great ideas there. Keep going with that task. All of these little these questions, and they're not little questions, big questions that I'm giving you. Continue to work on those, because you will find every day in these next few days, everything that goes well, everything where you feel, yes, that moved forward, that moved us forward. Analyze it. Analyze it. What did I do? But without judging. And maybe you'll see, well, yes, actually I did something and that didn't help. But we don't need to say, oh, I should have done this, I should have done that. No, just notice, observe, and change it for next time. Simple as that. We don't need to waste any more energy on any kind of judgment at all. To be honest, you're all too busy, you have too much to do, and you've got more important things to use your energy for. Now, I'm sorry, the comments are popping up so quickly. I'm sorry, I didn't see all of those. Great, sending the action points. It's very interesting. A lot of you are mentioning things around clarity, about communicating really well, listening to other people, and working collaboratively. Now, I'm not surprised at all that is where your focus is, and that's where our focus really needs to be. So, congratulations. That's really wonderful. Okay, I would like you now just to think about one particular element which quite often comes up when I'm talking to clients, and it's about this idea of self-sabotage. And now what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is sometimes, and this particularly happens when we're moving into a new role. So we're moving into a new context, maybe we have more responsibility, a bigger team, or into a different company, a different organization, so a new context. So we have that already that feeling of, oh gosh, this is a big step. We've got lots of things to do. And then all of a sudden, all of this courageous leadership that we had, it feels like it's disappeared. It's gone. It can really feel that it's just not there. And this can unfortunately catch people out a little bit, and they can find themselves feeling that they are a little bit out of sorts. They're not feeling themselves, and it can be really very disorientating. So I just want to look at that very briefly, because when that does happen, and I'll give you a personal example of this. When I was 26, I was about to say when I was young. When I was younger, when I was 26, I went to Kathmandu as a VSO volunteer, and I was an education advisor for the government in Nepal. Now, this was an unbelievable job, an absolutely unbelievable job. And I arrived, and yes, I had academic qualifications, but I had no experience of working with the government. I didn't know anything about the education system there. I couldn't speak the language. I'd had 3 months of language training, which was nowhere near enough. And I honestly, I nearly went home after the first 6 weeks. I nearly went home thinking, I just can't do this. I can't do it. It's just not for me. I have nothing to offer here. What am I going to do? And I really had that feeling of, no, I'm just going to jack it in. It's a waste. I'm not helping anybody here. It's it's the end. Now, this was after 6 weeks. it was clearly far too early to take that decision, and luckily I didn't. Because what I did do, and I was so lucky, and I really feel that during my career I have been incredibly lucky to have been surrounded by mentors, by people who have come to my rescue and helped me through many of these leadership hurdles. And I happened to come across a wonderful lady who took me under her wing, and I remember her saying to me, "No, you have got something to offer here. You really have. All of the work that you have done, you will be able to apply that, but it's just going to take some time. So I suggest you sit down with all these reports and you start reading those." And she gave me a concrete way to really start, and after that, slowly, step by step, as she said, it took time. But I was so close to self-sabotaging, so close to saying, "I can't do it, it's not for me." And yet, after being there for 3 years, I was contributing. I was able to do something. So I think there are two lessons there. Firstly, it's very, very normal when we change a context and we have a new team or a new position that we have that feeling. We can feel like the rug has been taken from out of underneath our feet. So that's very normal. The second thing is it can get better. We just need to ask for help, and we need to ask the right kind of people for that help. So don't be worried about asking any other people for assistance. Get a mentor, get help, because everybody is in that position at some point or another. The third thing you can do is really practice this idea of being very curious and self-aware, because again, if you recognize that, you're already halfway towards solving that problem. There's a key question that you can ask yourself in that situation, and it is, what do I need in order to feel better? Simply that. It's a very simple one, but it can be a very powerful one. What do I need? And remember, what you need in one situation is not going to be what you need in another situation. Remember that what someone else needs might not be what you need. And this is why we need to ask these questions of ourselves in a very honest way. So that's my very simple question for you there, and just make a note of that one. Now, one particular case that I have come across with clients is people who feel that they don't deserve that position that they've got. And I'll give you an example. I was working with a teacher recently who said to me that she'd been the only person in her family to go to university, and she'd got a very high profile position in a college here in France. She had a lot of responsibility, and all of a sudden she had this feeling that she didn't deserve to be there, that this position was not for her, and that she felt like a fraud, that everyone else had come from a different background. And I think that kind of feeling is one that can be quite difficult and can again, it can knock us sideways all of a sudden. And I would suggest that in that situation, there's a great coaching question for you, and it is: has anyone else like you ever succeeded in that position? And it's very likely that the answer is going to be yes, they have. And if the answer is no, well, maybe you have to be the first one to do it. You're the first one to do it, and other people are going to follow on behind you. You are going to be that courageous leader that can blast the way through. And I'd like to finish on that note, because I think this is again another great way of being courageous, and it's a way of taking attention off our own worries and anxieties, because when we start to think about what we're doing in terms of supporting the next generation of leaders, of being a role model for the next generation, our attention is taken off ourselves. It's just like this inner game of tennis, when we start thinking about the colour of the ball instead of whether we're going to actually hit it or not. So when we start thinking about supporting that next generation of leaders, about being the role model for them, it is a great way not only of helping them and doing a very important part of our jobs as well as leaders, but also a way of being more courageous, because it gives us that purpose. And after all, that is a very important part of your job as well, is to be that visionary leader and leading the way for the next generation of leaders behind you. Okay, we're going to be just finishing there. Just as a quick recap now, I'm going to just ask you, what have you got from today's session, and what has maybe resonated with you? And if you'd like to put that in the chat, that's great. I'm going to say goodbye to Facebook so that we can have our conversation together. So just give me one moment there.